What's up, Pod Pals? It's your buddy Adam, and you are checking out Podcast Launch Tips. This is the show where I teach you how to correctly launch a podcast. If you've been wondering how to launch a podcast, how to start a podcast, how to do this correctly, effectively, and efficiently, you're in the right place. I got some great podcasting tips for you here in this episode. And today we're talking about one of my favorite podcast launch tip topics, and that is podcast show art. And what I mean by show art is when you're scrolling through Apple Podcasts or Spotify, that's the image that people will see. All right. I see so many people mess this up. There are lots of really, really common, easily fixable mistakes. All right. Now, back in episode 38, I talked a little bit about SEO in your title, but I'm going to kind of recap that here. So with your show art, I want your show title on that art. And that show title needs to be what I call frying pan over the head obvious as to what your show is about. This is, again, not where we're going to get super cute and creative and it's like all, a mystery or an inside joke with you and 5 of your friends. If you want people to discover this, make it discoverable. All right. Make it SEO, search engine optimized. So have keywords in that title. Make it make sense. Like my show, this show, Podcast Launch Tips. All right. Pretty obvious. Podcasting Business School. Boom. Very obvious. That's the type of title, bland title. You can get more creative with your episode titles. How about that? We'll make that deal with you. We'll shake on it, fist bump, and we're good to go. All right. So now that we've recapped the title, let's talk about the art. All right. A few tips on this. A common mistake, what I believe is a mistake, is a lot of people like to put a big ass picture of their face on there. Just a big old picture of their head, real big. And like, look at me. I'm famous. I'm a podcaster. And you'll notice, like if you're watching the video, you see my podcast art behind me. I never put my face on it because I call it the billboard test. If you were to put your face on a billboard in the middle of Times Square in New York City, would anybody know who the hell you are? If the answer is no, I probably wouldn't put your face on the podcast art. All right. At least I wouldn't make it giant. Like if you can have it on there, cool. But the real feature of your podcast art needs to be the show title. I like big, thick, easily readable words. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can see my podcast art behind me. It's on the wall behind me and you can see you can read what it says. All right. Now, some of those shows don't still exist and that's all right. Or there's different variations. But the real lesson here is like when you're scrolling through, you don't want to see some picture of somebody that you don't know who they are. You want to see that super attractive episode title that you have now come up with. And it's in big, bold, blocky letters. All right. We do not want to use cursive. All right. Like you can't read that. If you just go on your phone, even if you have one of those giant, like basic iPad phones, if you have one of those, you still can't read. If something's written in cursive or script or whatever they're calling it these days, you can't see it. You can't see it on that little phone screen as you're scrolling through. Just search your podcast category. If you have a business show like I do, then or a how-to show, then search that. Go in there and just look through and look at some of the art and see like, all right, who is using big blocky letters and what are some examples of that? What do you like? What don't you like? Also look at some of the top rated ones and look and see like what colors are they using, not necessarily to copy what they're doing, but project ahead and go, I'm going to be a top ranked podcaster. What's going to stand out? Now, some of you may have branded colors for your brand that you've already built. Use that 100%. We want the podcast art to be on brand with your fonts, with your colors, all that stuff. If you're figuring that out, then what I did with my first show, I was at a health show called the Million Pound Mission. And I looked through the top ranked health podcasts and there's just a lot of big, bright, colorful, a lot of black backgrounds or like red and stuff like that, but very few just white with big, thick font. In the health space, there's a little more ego involved and people like to be like the tank top picture or the shirtless picture or the bikini picture of themselves. I wasn't exactly that guy, as you may be able to tell. So I created big blocky letters, had a cool logo, Million Pound Mission, white background, big black blocky letters. And when I was ranked in the top 200 and moving into like the top 50, I think the highest I got ranked was like top 25 or something like that. It stood out because everybody else, big picture of their face, or these big bright colors, and there was almost zero white background. So that made my show stand out. And I know a lot of people that told me, hey, I was scrolling through the top health podcasts looking for something new to listen to, and your logo popped. So I always ask people, like, how did you find me? So that actually does work. So we want thick letters. I recommend not putting a big picture of your face on there. We don't want cursive. A lot of people like put their name in cursive. I don't like that either, because people don't know how that what that is. And also your name will be listed in the author slot underneath the show anyway. So I probably wouldn't even put your name on there. Like, I don't put Adam Shibley on any of my podcast art, because again, I'm listed as the author of the show. Now, if you have a brand where your face is very like recognizable, again, if your name is very recognizable, maybe we put that on there then, because people are scrolling through Jillian Michaels or Michael Hyatt or whatever, Conan O'Brien. Like, those are people that they want their face and their name on the art, because they have that brand recognition already built in. If you're not there, we got to bank on colors that pop, words that stand out, really well named shows. All right. So think about that. And I know this is going to break a lot of your hearts, like having a boring but very obvious podcast title. And a lot of you want to go big and bold, and that's cool too. But I just want you to hear these words. I'll feel better by telling them to you and going, hey, this is just my experience. A long time in the game now, a lot of episodes, multiple shows. What works, what doesn't work. This works in this day and age. Maybe back in 2010 or 2005, things would be different. But things are the landscape is busy right now. Lots and lots of shows, and we want to make sure that yours stands out. All right. If you have questions, you can always hit me up on Instagram at Podcasting Business School. Otherwise, if you haven't launched yet and you need some help, check out my podcast launch blueprint at www.podcastingbusiness.school. And with that, I will send you out into the podcasting world, wishing you health, happiness, and many downloads.